You have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV.
Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Hey everybody, Ken Reed here, your TV Guidance Counselor on the show, TV Guidance Counselor. If you hear a kerfuffle in the background, the dogs are wrestling and running around. Larry tends to steal things from upstairs and then runs downstairs. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am now out of episodes from my, what's the word I'm looking for? Cut short. It's not really cut short. Let's say abbreviated LA trip. And you are now hearing my very first episode, post-quarantine in my house, doing it remotely. My guest this week is Kelli Dunham. Kelli's an amazing person, is a nurse, and I thank her so much for everything she's doing here, and she talks about that, but is also a comedian and a writer, and has a new special out called Not the Gym Teacher, or it's an album, actually. It's a special album. Actually came out last month, 2 months ago, February, but it's her latest, so check it out. I'm a little bit scattered, I apologize. I plan to be here every week doing new episodes, so I am, fixing up my remote studio here so that I can get the best possible quality for you guys. Working on getting some guests to do things remotely. I know that there's a lot of content out there, so I appreciate you still listening. Also, if you are on the Patreon, thank you so much. Also totally understand if you don't have the money or if money goes to a better cause than me. I am doing fine. But for those of you who are on the Patreon, I am continuing to put up secret menu video content from 2013, so I have hundreds of hours of that stuff, sort of pre-podcast, but is sort of in the same vein. So if you like that stuff, let me know. Also still working on Two Thumbs with Rachel. She started a new job remotely, and it is taking up an incredible amount of time. And each episode of Siskel and Ebert is 5 movies. So I thought we'd have more time to watch movies, but weirdly we don't. And oddly, I feel like I have less time to do things in the lockdown, but who knows? Things are strange. Anyway, please sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, Kelli Dunham.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Kelli Dunham, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, no, I mean, that's all right. Fantastic. Didn't have a lot to add to that. So.
Okay. I thought you were going to question that and be like, really? Because you don't sound fantastic. I think that you might be maybe fab, but not the full fabulous at this point in time. Yeah, no, we're doing okay. I always tell people that I essentially live in a record, toy, book, video store. So it's, there are worse places to be holed up, I guess.
Right, yes. That's the thing, it would be very different if it were like 20 years ago, but yeah, it's true. There's quite a bit to entertain me in my house. I'm an adult fan of Lego, and so there's like 8 entire Lego sets that I've never even opened up in my house, so I'm not going to be bored here. I might be annoyed by the insideness, but I'm not going to be bored for sure.
I had no idea there was a name. AFOL is what it's called?
Adult fan of Lego, yeah. It's interesting because Lego for a long time did not embrace adult fan of Lego because, I don't know, creepiness, I don't know. But it actually almost went bankrupt. It's but that's who they started developing, like the Harry Potter set has, 6,000 pieces or something like that. It took me like 5 months to put it together. That's not meant for a 6-year-old.
No. Have you ever, I do know they opened a Legoland here in Boston, and if you want to go to it as an unaccompanied adult, they make you wear a neon orange vest.
That's hilarious.
But there are people who do it. Like, that's just like, you're not doing anything wrong, but they put you basically in an outfit that's like, oh, this person's real dangerous for your kids.
Right. And the hilarious thing about that is, I'm sure it's some lawyer that tells them to do that, but the hilarious thing about that is we all know, like, as far as touching kids, that's usually relatives,
Oh yeah.
Because you've got a kid doesn't mean you're not touching any kids.
No. So. Yeah, like, it's like, oh yeah, that's a big, I'm going to go to Legoland. But anyway, let's not go down that path right now because we're going to talk TV, and you had requested a couple of specific issues, and I apologize in advance. I was not able to get you the exact issue you requested, but I got you one from the same year that had the same people on the cover of one of the ones you requested, so I got close.
Oh, it was perfect. It was perfect. And what's hilarious is my family subscribed to 2 magazines when I was a kid, Time Magazine and TV Guide. And so I can remember holding this exact TV guide in my left hand that I'm holding in my left hand right now.
Wow. So this was in Wisconsin?
Yes, this was in rural Wisconsin, northwest of Milwaukee, which I guess almost everything in Wisconsin is northwest of Milwaukee.
But weirdly, so that one of the things on the cover there, or the thing on the cover, is Laverne and Shirley, which was set in Milwaukee, I think, right?
Right, yeah, exactly. Laverne, Shirley, and Happy Days were both set in Milwaukee. The plot was that they worked in the, I think, Schlotz, which factory, which I think was supposed to be a parody of Schlitz. I have very distinct memories of watching it, and even as a kid. So this was I think 78, and so I would have been 10, and I can have very distinct memories of like, this is so depressing. Them working at the beer factory, which wasn't that bad, but then also just like their whole lives were based on trying to get married. And I can just remember the beer factory seemed fine. That seemed, like everyone I knew, their dad worked at the best job that you could have if you weren't a dairy farmer, was to work at the beer factory. I believe probably those were union jobs. In fact, we used to go in 5th grade, everyone did a field trip to the beer factory, which now I think about it, it seems a little inappropriate, right? Taking children to a beer factory. But that's what we did as
I mean, we used to go to tons of factories as kids. That's probably just inappropriate in general. Like here in Boston, I went to, I remember going to the Teddy Bear Peanut Butter Factory, and we also went to, weirdly had the most candy factories in the country for a while. So they had us walking through all these candy factories, and the most Willy Wonka type factory I can remember is in Salem, Mass, the Parker Brothers headquarters and factory was there. So we got to travel through that. But I imagine that just even aside from beer, the safety concerns alone has to be pretty monumental.
Right, because it's like there's just like a huge big metal thing full of like whatever fermenting hops. Like that's how they do it. But I mean, child safety wasn't really a thing in the 70s. So.
No. Have you ever seen the movie Midnight Madness?
No, I don't think I have.
Oh, it's great. It takes place. It's Disney's first PG movie. They actually invented, I think, Touchstone Pictures just to release this movie. It's Michael J. Fox's first movie. David Naughton stars in it, and it's about an all-night scavenger hunt in L.A. But there's a whole scene in the Pabst Blue Ribbon brewery, and one of the guys on one of the teams, who's a frat dude, just dives into the vat and drinks his way out, much like in Strange Brew. And I imagine that would be something that they would have to encounter at least once a month at one of those tours.
You would think so, yeah.
But on a more serious point, it sounds like, a fairly light show like Laverne and Shirley kind of indicated to you early that you wanted to get the hell out of there.
Yeah. Yes, it was. Like, Laverne and Shirley was... I mean, Happy Days was a little bit lighter, and I always felt like I wanted to be the Fonz, so I could relate to that. Like, I always wanted to be the Fonz. I even had, like, a black leather motorcycle jacket and all that. But Laverne and Shirley was like, oh, if this is what it is to be a woman in Wisconsin, I want out, please.
It's true. You've also managed to rid yourself of your Wisconsin accent. Was that conscious?
Well, I haven't lived there in a long time. People sometimes still, in the middle of a meeting, I'll be talking, I live in Brooklyn, right? Work in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. But once in a great while, in the middle of a meeting, and someone will say, like, wait, did you grow up in the Midwest? I actually am less, like, I used to have a lot of, like, not shame exactly, but just, like, feeling like, oh, I won't ever be a real New Yorker. But real New Yorkers come from everywhere. It's where your heart is, and my heart is definitely here. I'm on the lease of a rent-stabilized apartment, so I'm dying here. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not anytime soon, but eventually. I do feel like, more than even an accent, I feel like I still am a Midwesterner in my heart, Not my heart, but in my way I approach things and kind of the, hey, we can make this work, kind of, maybe an attitude. There is some, although I do have quite a few friends from the Midwest in who are also from the Midwest in New York. And it's kind of a nice combination because you kind of have the can do it like, well, we just try enough, we can make it happen of the Midwest, plus all the opportunities of living in New York City. So it's actually kind of a good combination.
Yeah, I was going to say you're kind of like a reverse Fonzie. He was so sort of Brooklyn-y in Wisconsin, and you've just flipped it. And I hope you still have the leather jacket.
I do, absolutely, I do, yeah.
Perfect. It's perfect. So you've reverse Fonzied, which in some ways may be better.
Yeah.
But so you guys got the TV Guide every week. Do you have siblings or is it just you?
I am the youngest of 7.
Oh, wow. So I imagine that guide was a pretty hot commodity. Like, was it hard to get a hold of it?
It was. When it came on, I was trying to figure out which day it came on.
Wednesdays usually it would come.
Not Wednesdays, yeah. So I can remember that often my sister would wait at the mailbox because it's a rural area, so the person would like drive up and put it in your mailbox, but our mailbox was a half a mile away from our house, so my sister would often wait, ride her bike there and then wait so that she got first crack at it. And also the other thing about the TV Guide is that my parents were kind of interesting, right? Like my dad was an alcoholic in the kind of way that lots of people were, meaning he had like 4 or 5 drinks every night. And you wouldn't have wanted him to not have his drinks. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, same. My dad would have his drinks on the couch till he fell asleep.
Right, exactly. And that was just kind of understanding of like, that's what men do, right? When they come home from work, they drink until they like fall asleep.
That's how you unwind.
Right, exactly. And then, maybe like more drunk on weekends or holidays or whatever, but that's just kind of the baseline. And, like youngest of 7, so there were, depending on what kind of job my dad had at the time, like sometimes we were okay and sometimes we were really like a little bit, more hanging on by the edge. And even with that kind of, in some ways, well, not chaotic because,
inconsistent finances?
Well, I was thinking more, in a big family, in most cases, your childhood experience is not, by the time I came along, my parents were only 12.8% of the family mass, right?
Right.
I'm not very inconsequential, but my childhood was very much informed or influenced by the fact that, like, by my brothers and sisters who were immediately older than me. So, like, my sister, Alina, I have a very distinct remembrance of her coming to parent-teacher conferences when she was in high school. Like, she walked from the high school over to my elementary school, and she came to parent-teacher conferences. I remember she sat at my desk with me, and we made owls out of paper for some reason. That was, like, the activity. And now I think about it, really, she was 16, and she was coming to my parent-teacher conference. I remember her teaching me how to tie my shoes, a very distinct memory of that. And because the siblings who were immediately older than me were actually very gracious and really kind of got into being older siblings and didn't torture me, that helped the situation a lot. But my parents were, there's a lot of, they were just trying very hard, and there were some really supporting 7 kids and all that. My dad's, just kind of the emotional shutdown that was required of men at that time.
Right.
When I try to explain, like, what it was like for my family, I would say, like, my grandma one time was trying to explain why my aunt hadn't been around, and she said, well, she has that disease where you feel so very all alone. And we were like, wait, depression, Grandma? Like, she didn't know the word for it.
Right.
Right? So it's like that level of emotional shutdown. But at the same time, my parents, my dad liked to read a lot of self-help books. He really liked, Dale Carnegie books and all that. And so they did some very kind of enthusiastic and I feel like ambitious parenting, and especially around television. And the biggest one was, in order to watch television, we had to plan from the TV Guide what we were going to watch. We had to kind of submit that as a proposal. We had to explain how it would help us watching TV would meet our, help us reach our life goals. We also had to read the equivalent amount of time in a nonfiction book and then present that at the dinner table, what we'd read. And then the most we could watch was an hour a day anyway. So you can imagine we didn't actually watch that much TV. We really had to think about it. It's also a little bit hard to make a case that, like, watching the Munsters is going to help you reach your life goals.
Now, was this an hour a day per child or an hour a day as a group collectively?
Well, we didn't have to watch it as a group, but if you could only use like if my sister was watching something and then I was in the room, I was also watching, like that took up my TV time.
I see. So one of the things I always talk about on this show that fascinates me is I think that those of us that grew up sort of pre-millennium in this world, we and obviously yours was more structured here, but we learned how to make a case for things we liked because we had to. You had to sort of convince people to watch what you wanted to watch, and it was a good skill to have. It was sort of a compromise skill that we were forced to develop.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. Yeah.
But that your parents sort of cultivated this in a more structured way, which is kind of impressive, frankly.
I am impressed with it. And actually, I can't say it didn't, we had, like, I have a lot of childhood memories because we didn't spend much time doing things that were passive, right? Like, if you're only going to let your kids spend an hour a day, watching TV, there's a lot of other hours. Now, we had chores and stuff like that. We also did a lot of, like, building forts and that kind of bullshit,
Right.
Our great memories, like when I get together with my cousins and we talk about, like, we get together for 2 weeks every year at Christmas and then 2 weeks during the summer. And, we don't have any memories of, like, even playing video games or whatever. It's all like, yeah, remember when we got the walkie-talkies and we were, like, spying on my sister and writing down everything she did and grading her. I remember we wrote down everything she did. We spied on her with walkie-talkies, and we wrote down everything she did, and then we graded everything she did from a 1 to a 5 on whether it was boring or not, and then presented her with a report card about her boringness.
How boring was she?
She was relatively boring, but she wasn't actually asking for the boring assessment.
No.
Because she was grown, right? Because they're older, and I remember she just kind of looked at us like, oh, okay, thank you for the assessment of something I don't care about.
Unsolicited boredom assessment. I think we need to bring this back. I think that this might be something that a lot of people in the 21st century could benefit from if you could bring back your creepily watching and assessing people's boredom level.
Well, I have to say that definitely I work in a high school, and I feel like the students that I have are constantly assessing how boring I am.
Okay, so you're getting it back now.
Yeah. I am getting it back. Yeah, they definitely, either how boring I am or how
lame.
Lame, yeah. I don't really use that word, but yeah, that's the word they use.
Yeah, I don't think I don't even know if they would say lame. Now, I'm sure there's some other 21st century youth slang that I don't understand that they've called me that I don't even recognize.
I'm trying to think of, like, usually they use dead ass in front of whatever it is. So dead ass means very, right?
Okay.
So, like, that is dead ass dumb, miss, like that.
Dead ass dumb. Okay, so it's like the Brooklyn youth equivalent of Wicked here in Boston.
Maybe so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Like there used to be a show called Principal's Office on A&E a few years ago, and it was a reality show where they just had a camera in various principals' offices as principals yelled at children. Pretty amazing. But one of the schools was in Providence, Rhode Island, and one of my favorite additions was a kid uttered the following phrase: "I didn't tell him I was going to beat the bag out of him. I just said he was a wicked Einstein-looking bastard."
That's perfect.
So really, the youth will inherit the earth. But because you only got an hour a day, getting 2 hours a night here on this show must have been a real treat.
It was very exciting. I didn't have to make such difficult choices, yeah.
Right. So let's dive in. What did you do for your Saturday night?
All right. So for the Saturday night, it was Jefferson's, which I did watch as a kid, and then Operation Petticoat, which was kind of an amazing show about, I don't know if you remember that or have heard it.
Yeah, it was based on a movie, I believe.
Oh, yes, I think you're right. And I don't know if this was the plot of the movie or not, but the twist is that the submarine was pink.
Yes.
So, yeah, so there was, like, all this stuff about masculinity and all this, like, fragile masculinity, and then they would, like, try and sneakily paint the submarine gray, and it's kind of an interesting, a little bit of a thin premise, but it was a lot of, as somebody who's assigned female at birth, but like kind of a masculine identity, I found it, like, really fascinating as a kid. I felt like it was it was a little more, I mean, in some ways more subtle than the masculinity of Wisconsin, or more examined,
Right. It's a paging Dr. Freud show. It's it's sort of, it's oddly subversive. I think John Astin was in it, if I'm remembering correctly, especially given all the sort of war shows we were getting at that time, which you had like Hogan's Heroes, the more warish comedies. This one really was sort of a bizarre, at times sort of surreal show, sort of in the Green Acres vein.
Right, yeah. I remember watching that. And then, of course, The Love Boat, which is back on, like, on maybe MeTV or something.
Yes, every Sunday.
Wow, The Love Boat has not aged well. I mean, really not aged well. I mean, I don't think anyone's making an hour-long kind of, like, comedy like that with the 3 intertwining plot lines. Like, that's just not really a convention we have anymore.
Yeah, you don't need it now. It was the thing I always say about that show is it was a good choice as a kid because you got a lot of bang for your buck because you basically got 3 or 4 shows in an hour.
Right, and also, I mean, it's fun to watch like all the stars before they became stars, right? So that was pretty fascinating.
Who's in the episode you have this week?
It's somebody acting as is it Zsa Zsa Gabor? It's somebody like that, being a advice columnist.
It's always Zsa Zsa Gabor.
Yeah, right.
While you're looking at the tone shifts were always really weird to me, and especially when I've revisited it as an adult, because there will be like a serious plot, then there'll be like a weird swingers, bizarre kind of 70s creepy sex comedy one, and then one that's about like that's oddly sci-fi. There'll be like aliens and like the Russian the KGB or something, and it'll all be in the same episode.
Right. There were so many of like, oh, somebody lost their partner or their, spouse or whatever, and now they're dating again. Like there was one almost for every. Oh, it's Eva Gabor.
Oh, Eva Gabor. Okay, speaking of Green Acres.
An advice columnist busy dispensing help that she overlooks her own marital problems. Also, a very common Love Boat convention where somebody is mixed up in everybody else's life and not paying attention to their relationship.
Of course. A good life lesson that we all... There's a Love Boat episode where this one haunts me to this day, and it's about a kid. It's sort of a Boy Who Cried Wolf, where this kid keeps pretending, and it's a kid, he's like 10, pretending he's going to commit suicide jumping over the edge of the boat.
Yes. Oh my God.
And then instead of like, hey, you shouldn't do that because, when you really do have a problem, no one's going to believe you. He ends up bringing his parents together by doing it again at the end. And I'm like, that seems like the wrong lesson.
Right, and also, I love that in the 70s that suicide was potentially a comic plot line,
Oh, always. I always say, every sitcom had that episode where you had to comedically literally talk somebody off a ledge.
Right, yes. No, that's very true. And also, Love Boat, often little gray, like most of the 70s and 80s entertainment, little gray in the consent area as well.
Oh, very much. Yeah, there's a
lot of that kind of, I can't be with you. Let me just grab your face and make you kiss me. And, okay, now things are better.
Yeah, or like, hey, Isaac, can you whip me up a couple of cocktails that'll get these women to sleep with me?
Right, yeah. Consent seems like we're a little bit more interested in consent now.
We certainly are, and that's probably a good thing. And I watch Love Boat now, and I'm like, I wonder if it's intentionally out in international waters for legal reasons. So then what'd you do Sunday night?
All right, so Sunday night, well, first of all, before the actual prime time, the Hardy Boys were on, and I do like me some Hardy Boys. So I was an avid reader of the Hardy Boys, and then they developed this. It was the first time they were ever developed for TV, which is interesting because the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew Mysteries came out, the first ones were in the 20s. In fact, I can remember accidentally getting an older copy, from a thrift store or something, and there was a point in which somebody was criticizing one of Nancy Drew's friends, whichever her lesbian friend is, I think Joe.
Yeah.
For wearing pants. It was women don't wear pants, literally that level, Same thing with the Bobbsey twins. The Bobbsey twins they're all written by that same person.
Yeah, and weirdly, the Bobbsey twins, I don't think they even attempted to make a TV show by the 70s, because when I think of the Hardy Boys TV show, was it Parker Stevenson? Is he one of them?
And Cassidy.
Yeah. I mean, it's so quintessentially 70s.
Yeah, and they both had the 70s haircuts, and there was just kind of the constant bad jokes. I mean, considering that Sean Cassidy was literally just kind of a teeny bopper music guy. If you rewatch it, they're not as bad as they could be. That was like a big deal for us, for me and my sister, because she was really into Sean Cassidy.
Oh, yeah.
Much so that my dad actually, and I don't even, for a man who was like as shut down as he was and kind of an emotional loser in every way, he took my sister and also me, even though I didn't necessarily want to go, but just as, I guess, fairness, he took us to a Sean Cassidy concert in the mid-'70s. It was like an open, like one of those ones on the side of a hill, where it's like an amphitheater, and it was just full of screaming. I remember that my ears hurt not from the music, but from the teenage screaming.
Oh, wow.
I imagine he probably had a lot to drink there. I remember him always having a beer in his hand. But that was still pretty generous to be like, oh, my preteen daughter really likes Sean Cassidy. I'll take her to the Sean Cassidy concert.
I wonder if he secretly loved Sean Cassidy, too.
I don't know. It's not like such the echelon of really sophisticated musical presentation, but he's still around. He's like a producer now, and we see him socially, and apparently he's really, really a nice guy. Yeah,
he's by all accounts a great guy and very grounded. Like, I think he sort of checked out of that world pretty early and managed to ground himself. He produced the show American Gothic. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
But I know, I'm familiar with it.
Amazing, weird, dark show he produced with Sam Raimi, of all people. And he does a lot of sort of horror, sci-fi, sort of dark underbelly type shows, which you would never guess. Because as dark as the Hardy Boys get, I think was just like pirates smuggling things in caves.
Right, exactly. It was never, and then there's always like a laugh track at the end a little bit.
Right,
so,
the classic freeze frame where everything's okay.
Right, exactly. So, that would have been at the 7 o'clock, and that was something I loved. And actually, recently saw, I'm trying to think if I looked for it on YouTube or if it's actually playing, it's in syndication somewhere. But it was not as bad as you would think it was. I mean, the acting is terrible, and definitely the Nancy Drew acting is really bad, but, considering it just could be so much worse. But the other things on Sunday night, All in the Family, definitely.
You had to. It was like illegal to not watch it.
Right. And my dad is a classic person. So, that whole thing of like, that they tried to make a character that was parodying who Archie Bunker was and ended up making him a folk hero.
Right.
And that exact same thing happened with my dad. Like, my dad loved Archie Bunker, and a lot of the way my mom and my dad interacted were very similar to their marriage. It actually seemed very like, it wasn't until I was older until I realized that was supposed to be kind of a parody, or kind of not even maybe so much a parody, but maybe like a hyperbolic.
Yeah, I guess it's an exaggerated view of how people are in order to convey the sort of messages.
Right, and in fact, it did not seem like that to me when I was a kid. That actually is pretty close, like my dad with his chair and "Shut Up, Edith" and that whole thing. Very, very, very similar in some ways, and the same kind of like. Although I didn't ever hear to his credit, I never heard my dad say anything racist. Definitely there were like certain, more people that are more common in Wisconsin that he was like, had judgments about, people who put a lot of lights on the outside of their houses was one of his biggest complaints.
Right.
But he was like in that same way of like extremely, extremely judging, like, what you doing here? Like that kind of thing.
Right. So it's more of a class sort of issue or something for him. Tribal sort of.
Just that everyone ought to be able to kind of make themselves better with their own effort.
I see.
Whatever.
I see.
Everybody whining about, oh, me, Dad, what are you whining about? Blah, 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 blah.
Right.
That kind of thing. I do remember one thing about All in the Family that was very captivating to me is they would show the houses. So that was supposed to take place in Queens, right?
Right.
They would show the kind of row houses one after another. That was like in the beginning when they were shown when they just had started the music, before they actually started the words to the song. I can remember thinking, oh my God, if I could only grow up. I can remember just thinking, oh, if I could live in a house that was a tattered house, things would be perfect.
Yeah. So you got sort of your view of New York, and especially the outer boroughs, from these shows, and then when you eventually ended up there, how did it stack up to what you thought it would be?
I have to say, and I also just wanted to live in a place that had a fire escape. That seemed like the most romantic, beautiful thing I could ever imagine, a fire escape. And I'm looking out at my fire escape right now. So I guess 10-year-old Kelly would be very pleased with me.
Have you ever had to use a fire escape?
I mean, in the way that not for a fire, in the way that New Yorkers use their fire escapes for like, hey, let's get out here and talk to the people. I'm sure before this quarantine is over, I will use my fire escape as a porch. I'm pretty sure.
Right. It's not an escape from fire. It's an escape from life.
Right. Exactly.
So then what'd you do?
Okay. So then Archie Bunker. And then the last one was a half an hour of the sitcom Alice, which, true to what you would expect, had a rape plot for laughs. It was, the plot was something like...
It's fascinating that show is a 30-minute multicam laugh track sitcom based on a dramatic movie.
So it's an amorous high school football star faces fouling out when he puts full court pressure on Alice.
Yeesh.
So... without irony.
Oh God. Yeah. It's as I've been doing this show, I've talked to a lot of people who worked on sitcoms in the 70s or in the 80s and the sort of very special episodes and the episodes like this that do tackle, no pun intended for the football star, that do tackle these sorts of, now extremely uncomfortable subject matters, and they do it in maybe a ham-fisted way. But I've been, my faith in humanity has been restored in a lot of ways because for the most part, the people creating these shows were truly trying to comment on these things in a way that they thought was helpful. If that makes sense.
I mean, you could say like, oh, okay, well, maybe we don't need to be all watching that now or whatever, but you can't actually interpret yesterday through the lens of today. It doesn't even make sense. So.
Oh yeah, the sort of lenses of intent and context are extremely important. But one of the things that a show like that, or at least they were trying to accomplish, was, and to your point, where you're watching all these shows with your whole family, or at least all your siblings, is they did bring up issues that people probably wouldn't have talked about on their own, or may not have known how to bring up with people in their family, and there's some value to that.
Right, yeah, absolutely. I think about that. The thing that we watched all together, most commonly, like through childhood, for as long as it lasted, was Mork and Mindy. That's like, what to talk about is so silly. But I can remember there were conversations about, there was a Mork and Mindy episode where Mork gives away his coat when he's freezing out. And so it's really about like giving and selflessness, and also like making sure you still don't give away your coat so that you die, that kind of thing.
Right.
I remember having a conversation about that, and we would have never had a conversation about that, Like, I feel like all of Midwestern culture is based on, like, it's okay, you don't need to help me, I'm just fine.
Right. We'll be okay.
Yeah, exactly. There's, have been opportunities for that, for sure.
What is that everything you had on Sunday?
Yeah, so that was All in the Family, and then Alice, that was Sunday, and then Monday... Oh, okay. So Monday there was Good Times, which I actually love watching now. There's some really interesting things about Good Times, and I do feel like even though they were supposed to be very poor because they were like living right in the housing development in Chicago
and Cabrini Green.
I can remember as a kid thinking like, are they rich? Because like the trappings of rural poverty and urban poverty looks so different that I was completely unfamiliar with them. I thought that anyone who lived in an apartment had to be rich. Rich is, the exact opposite of what people think. But because I didn't know anyone who lived in an apartment.
Right, and it seems so urban and sort of sophisticated, like a big city thing.
Right, exactly. And then there was Roller Girls, which I don't remember as a kid, but it has Joanna Cassidy in it.
Yes.
Somebody I remember was like one of the first people I was like, ooh, do I want to be here, or am I attracted to her?
Joanna's a friend. She's been on the show.
Oh, is that right? Well, yeah.
Well, I think you're not alone in that assessment. There are many people. To this very day, we discussed Roller Girls. It was, they were trying to obviously capitalize on the huge roller derby boom of the 1970s, which had been a fad in the 50s, and was one of the things where they were trying to come up with more sports to air on television, basically. And they were like, well, roller derby's a great one. I don't know why. And it became a huge fad. So they were really trying to capitalize on that with this show, Roller Girls, that was sort of a multicam comedy, but only lasted, half a season.
I mean, it had to have been expensive to film, right? I mean, I don't know, maybe they just did very limited. But, I mean, to try and get any action and all that, it just seems like it just seems more expensive than Age is Enough or something.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it was also, there was a Raquel Welch movie called what was it called? The Something Bomber, that was about roller derby, and it was kind of sort of capitalized on that as well, and your rollerball and all those sorts of things. But those shot on film sort of series, even comedies that required some amount of action, were pricey.
And then there was also MASH was on Monday night, and MASH. I mean, I know people love MASH. But also, MASH was hella rapey, too. There was a lot of Alan Alda's of the Hawkeye character, like, trying to trick nurses into having sex. It was pretty rapey,
Yeah, it's that was sort of the cliche of the sort of cad that we all like, the sort of main protagonist. Like, in order to make them seem cool, it was always like, well, cool guys are always trying to get laid, and they're real clever. And it was, like, shorthand for, like, the guy that you wanted to be, I guess.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, interesting. And one of the things I did find interesting about MASH, and even watching it in retrospect, so if you look at how, so I'm a nurse, and as a nurse, I can say that in general, nurses in mainstream media are presented completely like they're not based in reality at all. Like, they have nothing. Most presentations of nurses have nurses doing things that they don't ever do in hospitals. They mostly have doctors doing what nurses do, in fact. And
right.
And also have like these tropes of kind of like the the Madonna whore trope. Like the options are like that nurses are essentially sex workers, which fine, this is not like shade on sex workers at all, but it is a separate profession.
Yeah. They're either fetishized, or they're like the nurse from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Right,
exactly. So in fact, the nurses in MASH even still hold up to this day as being like, they're very under most circumstances, like, they're very on top of what's going on medically. They're the Hot Lips character is, even though she seems like she's bananas a lot of the time, she's also like really a leader and also really fights for her nurses. So it's interesting that, a 30-year-old portrayal of nurses. But the thing is, nurses in the military, right, are often, like, I have I'm from a family of nurses, and my sister-in-law, who's Navy, like, just loved working as a nurse in the Navy, but just hates it as a civilian, she's an officer in the Army, or the Navy. So that's an interesting portrayal, and I can remember even as a kid feeling warmly, even though I think we weren't exactly supposed to feel warmly towards the nurses, but if you could separate them from just being decoration for the doctors, which
yeah, it wasn't sort of a Benny Hill, let's chase him around the gurney kind of thing. It did present them as having a skill level, so I think that was. I'm trying to think, to your point, if there were any shows before that they weren't just things to lust after for Dr. Kildare or something like that. And people take for granted shows like ER, Chicago Hope, or the sort of, or even St. Elsewhere, which wasn't completely free of that, but it really was a different world as far as portraying them as like actual skilled characters before MASH, for sure.
Right. And I mean, even to be honest, ER is not great. I mean, sometimes they do, but they have like ER nurses work pretty independently, and the idea that any ER nurse ever has to be told to take somebody's blood pressure is ludicrous.
Right.
Yeah, don't even get me started on mainstream portrayal of nurses, even though I already have started myself. But
what do you think is the best? What show is the best portrayal of nurses?
I mean, I have to say that Nurse Jackie, of course, totally jumped the shark.
Right.
But as far as the portrayal of Nurse Jackie as somebody, the things she does in the ER are things that nurses do in the ER.
Okay.
Not so flushing the person's ear down the toilet or whatever she did at that point. But in general, like the actual medical interventions that she does. And the thing that I like about Nurse Jackie, and they did when was it Showtime or HBO?
Showtime, I think.
They first went to nurses. They wanted nurses' approval on that, and nurses are there are more nurses than any other healthcare provider. Many more nurses than doctors or respiratory therapists or whatever. So they really wanted nurses to get behind that, but some of the nursing organizations felt really reluctant because of the addiction plot.
Right.
But it's not like, so there's no nurses who have pill problems? Of course, that's not true.
Yeah.
Like usually it's dealt in-house if possible. Like nursing licensure boards have ways of dealing with it. But anyway, the things that she did and the fact that she was supervised, not by doctors, but by the nurse manager, that's an important part. Like people think that doctors are bosses of nurses, and that's not actually how it works.
Right.
If you are working as a nurse in a hospital, your boss is a nurse always. So I really appreciated that. It's not perfect in other ways, and certainly the last seasons were like, what the hell is going on?
Right.
But there were, bits of it that looked like nursing.
Have you seen the show Getting On? They did a U.S. remake, but it was originally written by Joe Brand, who's a stand-up comic in the U.K.
So I've seen UK version, and I watched it specifically because people were like, oh yeah, that seems very realistic portrayal of nurses. And I was like, I don't know about that.
Right. Yeah, because she was a psychiatric nurse before she started doing stand-up, which I think is a pretty different profession.
It's just a completely different set of skills, really.
Right. Right. Anything else on Monday night there?
Yes, One Day at a Time, which it's interesting because I did not have much appreciation for One Day at a Time in its original form, but I really, really love the remake. And then I went back and found a couple episodes when I was writing this down of, just like some snippets on YouTube, and I was like, there is a lot to be said for this as Chosen Family, talking about Chosen Family, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pretty revolutionary show, especially for the time. And I've actually also sort of encouraged people who've liked the new one to go back and watch the original because they're really not that different.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting, right? That's been something kind of fun to go back and also, it's like because who picked it up, like Pop TV or something like that?
Yeah.
If I wouldn't have even been able to watch the old one if it hadn't gotten picked up because I was very, very, very bitter about Netflix canceling the remake. So.
Yeah, I mean the Netflix model's super weird because ratings don't really matter. It's new audience, so every single person who has a Netflix subscription could watch every episode of One Day at a Time, and it wouldn't be considered a hit for them. They'd need new people who signed up for Netflix just to watch it, or else it wasn't a hit, which is really strange.
I'm a performer. I understand that you need a certain amount. I understand there's like a business to this, right? It's why it's called business, but but there also was, and it's not like maybe Netflix execs problem. Maybe they should just thought about it a little bit more. But they put out a tweet that said something like, if you felt yourself represented this new One Day at a Time when you hadn't been before, don't take it personally that we're canceling it. Your identity is just as important. And I was like, you stupid fucks. Right. You canceled it because, you're not making enough money from it or whatever.
Right.
Whatever metric you need to make this worth it for you to make it, it doesn't make it. That's fine. But don't say some fucking condescending bullshit tweet that somehow that my identity matters now because you said it matters because you're the fucking social media person, the 23-year-old who, is a social media person. It was so annoying.
Yeah, it's just like...
I can deal with a lot of things, not condescension.
Yeah, it's just like patronizing damage control is worse than anything else.
You're right. Say we hate non-binary people. I'd be much better with that.
Yeah,
condescending.
Be honest versus condescending. We'd all appreciate that. Cool. So what did you do on Tuesday?
All right. So Tuesday was Happy Days in Laverne and Shirley. Now the Laverne and Shirley episode was the one
they bring home a horse from the glue factory.
Which I was like, wait, did I read that right? Went and looked around, and they literally brought home. That's a little bit of a jumping a shark moment, right? Like, what? There was a horse? What? That makes no sense.
I mean, they got real silly, and Laverne and Shirley. I mean, obviously, never the most realistic show, and it really jumped the shark when they moved to California and they kind of stopped pretending it took place in the 70s. It's a silly show.
But something about Laverne and Shirley that I talk about all the time with the high school students I work with, whenever they're combining some weird thing or they think I'm combining a weird food, I tell them about milk and Pepsi, and they absolutely don't believe it. And I was like, no, it was a whole thing.
Yeah.
Milk and Pepsi.
Did you ever try it?
I used to drink like Kool-Aid and milk.
Okay.
Kind of make like a shake out of it. Yeah, you have to be careful because if you mix something too citrusy, then you end up at kernels.
It's a weird one. I've never been brave enough to try the milk and Pepsi, and I've also never been brave enough to try hot Dr. Pepper, which is how they used to market it in the winter.
I mean, Dr. Pepper's, I can see how it could go either way. I feel like it'd be a very different, just a very different beverage, hot. You know?
Yeah. Hot carbonated beverage is weird.
Yeah, that's true.
It wouldn't register low on the boring scale, though, if you caught me drinking hot Dr. Pepper.
That's true. Me and my cousin would give you a pass on that.
Yeah.
Two more. Three's Company, which it was kind of interesting, right? Because I did not know, even though I was like a tomboy always growing up, I got kind of hassled about it, in the way that girls get hassled about being a tomboy, which is not as bad as boys are hassled for being effeminate.
There's almost a respect that other boys have for tomboy girls, in that they'll make fun of them, but be like, "Oh, but you got some skills I can respect."
Right. Exactly. I mean, I feel like sports are the thing, in the same way. I feel like in high school, what saves gay boys is theater, and what saves gay girls is softball.
Yes.
I did not hear the word lesbian, I am sure, until I was a teenager. Like, I didn't know it was a thing that you could be. So my first real experience one of my first experiences or things that familiarity with was Three's Company, as far as like gayness, right? That was
right. Because John Ritter's character had to pretend to be gay to get cheap rent, which was the only acceptable way to be gay in 1978.
Right, exactly. And he was very, very over the top. But I can still remember being like, that's a thing. That's a thing. Like, I did not know it was a thing. And so that way in which, like, like all the early like, kind of tabloidy books about, lesbians for certain, they always end up being killed in the end, and yet they were our classics. Like, The Well of Loneliness is the most depressing book you could even... It's called The Well of Loneliness, right. It was our classic. Like, people have copies of it at their house because it was the only thing.
Yeah, it's back to what we were talking about before, where, looking through the 2020 lens at these things, they seem, and they are in a lot of ways, insensitive, offensive even, but in a complete black hole of representation, kind of any little bit was helpful, sort of. Right.
It's like if you were a dinosaur and you didn't even know, and then you saw the dinosaur bones and you were like, wait, there's something else like me here?
Right. They're all dead, but they were a thing.
Yeah, they're a thing, so maybe I'm a thing too. And then the last on Tuesday night that I also related to was Family. And do you know why I liked the Family? Do you know what I related to on
there was there was a gay character in Family?
Well, not officially, but Christy McNichol's character.
Yes.
She was like riding a skateboard around, and she was a tomboy, and definitely, like, Christy McNichol was, as when I was a tween, definitely was like, oh, I see you, Christy McNichol.
Yeah, because she was. I mean, we all were affected by Little Darlings in different ways.
Right.
Which is her and Tatum O'Neal, who I think are like 14 in that movie, making a bet to see who can lose their virginity the fastest. You could write so many dissertations on that movie alone. But a big part of that is sort of Christy McNichol's inherent sort of weird energy in that respect.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so that was a great, and also, it wasn't just Kristen McNichol's character, it was the mom's character, and how she looked at that kid, and how she looked at that kid with complete acceptance,
Right.
Like maybe a little bit of a skewed eyebrow, but always complete acceptance. So.
Right. This is how my daughter is, and I love her.
Right, exactly.
Which, again, unusual. For years, and especially in sort of the 50s sitcoms, it was like the parents worried if their kid kind of veered even the slightest bit away from the path. It was like, geez, what am I going to do? I don't know if you're a Roseanne fan of the show, but there's a really, really good, all the Halloween episodes are favorites, but there's one where DJ wants to dress up as a witch for Halloween, and Dan's really bothered by it and keeps trying to get him to want to dress up like a warlock instead, and DJ's like, no, I'm a witch. And at first you're like, oh, this is, pretty typical, whatever. But at the end, there's a really interesting speech where Dan talks about the reason it bothers him is he just doesn't want DJ to get beat up or to get ostracized, rather than he doesn't want his kid to maybe be gay. It's like he's worried for him, which is a totally more subtle and there's a lot more gray in that sort of take. And I thought that was really smart.
Yeah, it's definitely more, it's also just kind of more generous in terms of parenting, because it's more of a parent thinking about the kid rather than how that kid's masculinity or lack thereof reflects on their masculinity.
Right.
A little bit more, it's less insecure,
Right, totally. And I think that's an interesting take, and those sorts of just slightly askew looks at how you expect things, like in family, and the acceptance is again, those make a difference, I think, or unintended maybe, in the kids' lives who are watching them.
Yeah, definitely. Also, I'd forgotten about this. I just looked it up while we were talking. Christy McNichol came out as queer in 2012.
Yes.
She came out specifically in response to some, teen bullying thing or something like that. Like she was, which, it seems like after you've been closeted for a while, it must at some point be a little bit awkward. I have to appreciate that.
Yeah, totally. And she's also one of those people that when that came out, we were all like, oh, yeah, really? but it was the era. It was tail end of it, but she was a star in the era when there were people who were like, Liberace's looking for the right woman. And they never questioned it. Paul Lynn's got a wife and kids. They never questioned it. It was like, we're getting the vibe, but they say that there's no way that could be true, and we'll just move on.
Yeah, and then also just kind of, I think, the longer and harder you fight for the closet, right? Like the more it gets to be like, you can't just kind of just be like, okay.
It's a bunker at that.
Right. Like you see it even with, I think one of the amazing things is how it's, really women in sports, right? Like, so when the original WNBA, or what was it before the WNBA, I forgot, started, like everyone was so closeted, and then the next generation of high school female sports folks would not go back into the closet when they went to college, and they're like, nah, I'm still kissing my girlfriend.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because they could. It was that little step that they needed.
Right, exactly. And then because people were just never in the closet, they didn't have to come out, so it ends up being less melodramatic, and I'm sure in some ways less painful too, hopefully.
Yeah, you would. Well, we'd hope. We'd hope we're moving forward, but you never know. Wednesday night, what'd you do?
All right, so 8 is Enough, which was one of my favorite shows. I liked 8 is Enough quite a bit. It was the only time on TV besides the Waltons that I saw a family that was bigger than mine, so I appreciated that. And although in some ways I related more to the Waltons than 8 is Enough, I felt like very aspirational about 8 is Enough. They had that big house, and I think the dad was like, he did something white collar. Maybe he was like a journalist or something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Dick Van Patten was well off on that show.
Yeah, and I really appreciated I also thought like some of their stuff that they did around grief was pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. They did talk about, like, the mom died, right? And then they brought in the new person. Her first name was Abby, the character, and they did show the kids struggling with that, which I thought was pretty interesting. And I remember I wanted to be Adam Rich, with his little skateboard and his little, like, goofy haircut.
At least you wanted to be Adam Rich then and not Adam Rich in the 80s and 90s. Poor Adam Rich.
Yeah, it was a lot.
And that was a show that was just, for some reason, I could never get into. It was so overtly 70s, I found it off-putting. And in my mind, the episodes just get completely intertwined with the Partridge Family, even though they're nothing alike.
I could see how that is, because there's kind of that, like, the Willie Ames character is similar to that, the red-haired kid in the Partridge Family, the middle-aged one who was really into money, and yeah, I could see how that would be. I mean, they're pretty different, but they also are like, there's kind of a lot of kids with about the same difference in between. The thing that also was interesting to me as like a kid, the youngest of 7, was the oldest character, who was in med school, was so much older than Adam Rich's character, right? And their relationship felt like my siblings' relationship. And I didn't see that much on TV, where it's like, yeah, like if you have an older sibling, they end up kind of being, in loco parentis or whatever. So that I liked. I wouldn't have had the words for it, but it felt like my family.
Right. The sort of, again, that the representation of family units that aren't the nuclear family unit was unusual and important.
Yeah.
Then what'd you do after 8 Isn't Up?
So then there was the rock and roll sports records, which I guess to me seems like what Battle of the Network Stars, but only with music.
Okay, so this is I was unfamiliar with this. This is almost like a proto version of MTV's Rockin' Jock, which they had in the 90s. Who do we have participating in this one? 1978.
Well, I remember Captain and Tennille. Let's see if I can open this up Wednesday.
Noted rock act, Captain and Tennille.
Okay, Boston, the Commodores, Yellow, Earth, Wind and Fire, Freddie Fender, Leif Garrett, Kenny Loggins, Anne Marie, Seals and Crofts, Rod Stewart, and Tanya Tucker.
That's a weird mix. Like, first of all, Rod Stewart, amazing soccer player, especially in 1978. That guy was an athlete.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah, like almost could have played pro. I'm imagining he's going to kick Kenny Loggins' ass.
Yeah, I would imagine. Also Shanana. And then the coaches were Sandy Duncan and Phyllis Diller.
Oh, Sandy Duncan.
Oh.
So I'm just imagining Phyllis Diller coaching Earth, Wind, and Fire at anything. It's something I would watch all day.
How that would work. Major rock talent out to break records instead of making them! Exclamation point.
Oh God, you know that's just some exec was like, okay, records, I got it.
Yeah, somebody worked hard on that for sure.
Yeah. Wow, I'm gonna have to dig that up.
10 Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. Oh, reporters include Christy McNichols. So how about that? That's a bonus there.
There you go. Now I really need to hunt this down now. That's more and more fascinating the more I learn about it. Wow. All right. Well, that's a good night. Thursday, what are you doing as a sort of hangover from that?
Oh well, there's a special about Benji.
Okay, about the movie?
Well, it was about Benji as a phenomenon, it seems like. Okay, so it's called Benji's Story. No, Benji comes to TV in his own special. It's called The Phenomenon of Benji. Oh, I had it right. Brought to you, by the way, by Gaines.
Of course.
Fun for the whole family as Charlie Rich, Meredith McRae, Edgar Buchanan, and Jesse Davis join America's favorite canine. So it seems like it was a salute to the canine film star.
Weird.
There are two Benjis. The first began its career in TV's Petticoat Junction. I didn't know that.
Oh, yes.
You know that Benji was Petticoat Junction?
I weirdly did. And Petticoat Junction is a show that's more or less forgotten, even though Green Acres was a spin-off of Petticoat Junction, and Benji got his start in Petticoat Junction.
I did not realize that. Okay, and won fame in the theatrical feature Benji from 74. I remember that. I feel love all around. And then starring in For the Love of Benji, which I also saw in the theater. Clips of Benji's performances highlight the show, which is fantastic because Benji didn't have that much to do.
Yeah, he was just cute.
Yeah, he was adorable. Have you seen the movie? And also, I feel like that was like the first Mutt Pride. Like it used to be like we were very focused on, but he was a mutt, and everyone's like, yeah, look how great he is. He's smart, even though he's a mutt. And we know, of course, other than purebred dogs. But do you remember the Disney movie? And I saw it in the theater. The Cat from Outer Space.
Oh, of course. Of course.
I was just rewatching it on Disney Plus. I watched it like 5 times since we started quarantining. It's kind of amazing because you really have to think that they just followed the cat around, and whatever the hell the cat did, they just made that into the plot of the movie, because how on earth are you getting a cat to do things? You know what I mean?
You can't train a cat. You can bribe them sometimes to go places with food, but even then, The Cat from Outer Space is a movie I think that's ripe for some sort of reboot. There's actually a lot of people on like Etsy and stuff that sell replicas of that magic space collar.
Really? That's really one of my favorite movies. There's a big scene where the cat is on the front of the bike and they're riding away. I think it's a motorcycle. They're riding away from military people and the bike starts flying. And I'm like, okay, so did Steven Spielberg see that as a child?
Oh, he must have. Steven Spielberg is one of the least original directors. You could edit together all of his movies with scenes from other movies.
Right, yeah.
I mean, Benji was such a weird phenomenon because it wasn't like Lassie or Rin Tin Tin that were these sort of heroic dogs. It was more like Route 66. Like, he's just kind of there and cute.
Right, like he'd do 2 quick barks.
Yeah. And then there was all kinds of Benji ripoffs, like you had The Littlest Hobo. There was a really weird early 80s show that was actual Benji, but it was called Benji Zax and the Alien Prince. That was a live-action Saturday morning show where Benji, some kind of weird alien, and an alien prince sort of traveled around helping people. But you also had Here's Boomer, which was a Benji ripoff TV show. I mean, there was a ton at this time.
Yeah, people were trying to capitalize on this, like, people of Benji. And I remember there was a lot of merch, too. I remember, like, the kid who sat across from me in 8th grade wearing a Benji t-shirt. Yeah.
Can you imagine? I mean, I guess kids can wear whatever they want now, but I'm just like, 8th grade, kids were like, yeah, Zeppelin, The Doors, Benji.
It was a simpler time, quote unquote.
It certainly was. Did you ever see the movie Chomps?
I did not see the movie Chomps.
Oh man, it's 1979 or 80, and it's basically about, it's like if you combined Benji with RoboCop, but it's also 1979. If you're looking for something quarantine to enjoy, I cannot recommend Chomps highly enough.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I'm writing it down right now.
Yeah, and if you do watch it, let me know what you think, because I'd love to hear your assessment of Chomps. So Friday night, the final night of the week, what'd you go with?
Okay. So this actually made me sad because it was the Captain Tennille special, the one with Kenny Rogers.
Oh, yes. Recently lost.
Yeah. So I was in the hospital when Kenny Rogers died. And all of a sudden I just see all my friends posting, because all my queer beaux are obsessed with Dolly Parton. So
Yeah.
Posting his duets with Dolly Parton, right? And Kenny Rogers was the first concert that I went to. I went to see Kenny Rogers. My mom let me go by myself when I was in 3rd grade, which now seems bananas. I was in 3rd grade, which meant I was 8, right? I went to see him at the Wisconsin State Fair. She dropped me off at the entrance to the fairgrounds. I remember I had my little ticket in my hand. I was wearing my hip hugger jeans, and I went by myself to the Kenny Rogers concert. So I was quite obsessed with Kenny Rogers when I was a kid. It was he kind of like rode that line between country, which was like, you know, in general, the music that the popular music I would have heard around me in rural Wisconsin, and like some kind of rock and roll, you know. And I even owned like his early albums when he was with the First Edition. Like I went and got those, which he actually, some of that is kind of amazing. Though, like I just dropped in to see what condition my condition is.
Yeah, it's very 60s sort of psychedelic.
Right. And then there was Don't Take Your Love to the Town, which is basically a wife-aside. But it's interesting, right? Because the guy uses a wheelchair.
Right.
So it's kind of an interesting, you know, in an era where there was so much ableism, where like, you know, basically people with disabilities are mostly seen as just almost like passive objects, that misogyny kind of took over that. So it was okay, a person could be an active participant in their own life as a person with a disability if they were trying to kill a female. Right.
Only if they're a monster. Let's look at the hierarchy of people we discriminate against here.
Right.
But yeah, it's very sure. Also, I want to mention you mentioned that he died while you were in the hospital as if it was your fault. Like, I couldn't look out for him. I left my post. Right. So I was on Kenny Rogers' watch, and I left my post.
And then it was just it. He was gone. You know, because he toured, I think like a year ago, and he was even advertising it as his last tour. And I was like, dude, he's not going to stop touring. But I was like, oh, I guess he knew something we didn't know. I don't know.
Yeah. So, Kenny Rogers.
So I was, you know, sad about that. It was my first concert, and you know, I had I had many a Kenny Rogers T-shirt, and I used to have a cowboy hat, was like the one he wore in The Gambler.
Wow.
You know, yeah, I was very. I remember we didn't have a VCR, and so when he did that made-for-TV movie about The Gambler, you know, it was like a 90-minute version of the song.
Oh yeah.
Which was such a great, you know, also he'd never acted clearly before. So I actually audio taped it. Like I had my little cassette recorder and I audio taped it on the TV.
And you just listen to relive the radio play in your mind of Kenny Rogers' acting performance. Right, exactly. And it's funny because you know, his kind of character, I guess he had like an old bullet wound in his knee or something like that. So I had a knee replacement that went very wrong. I've had it replaced 5 more times. So I have kind of a Kenny Rogers in The Gambler-esque limp. And so I try and,
when people are like, always want me to have like a decorated cane or something like that, and I'm like, no, I don't want it to, draw more attention to me than me,
Right.
But it is some things I try and channel, like the coolness of Kenny Rogers with his bullet, his old war injury. So.
Someone's going to be like, she's got that Kenny Rogers swagger.
That's what I'm hoping for. That's something nobody's ever said, though. So that just in my head.
Well, they haven't said it yet. And, after this comes out, it's going to blow up. So was that a 2-hour event?
No, that was just an hour. But after the Captain Tennille variety hour with Kenny Rogers was The Incredible Hulk, which really was one of my favorite shows. It was the Bill Bixby version, and he was so good in that. And also, comedian Kate Clinton always says, like, about Midwestern child rearing, if you had a feeling you had to go to your room,
Right.
There weren't a lot of permissible ways of expressing anger when I was a kid. And I was a kid who, had a little bit of a temper, I guess, and probably would have had less of a temper if I would have been able to ever express anger in any healthy way. But there was something about Bill Bixby getting mad, and he didn't get mad about, like, having to wait in line too long, right? Like, it was always like he was he was, like, standing up for somebody or for himself, like when he was in peril or whatever. So he was all angry for good reasons, and his anger was so effective. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah,
he was like, oh, you won't like me if I'm angry. Coming out of clothes, and my anger has actually helped this situation. So it was a very different way of looking at anger than when I was a kid.
For those of you listening at home and you're playing TV Guidance Counselor Bingo, you're about to get a square. I need to introduce you to the Hulk Out list. Are you familiar?
I am not familiar.
So somebody went through every episode of The Incredible Hulk and wrote down what made him Hulk out in every episode. And Ken Johnson, who created that show, posted it as a PDF on his website, and it is amazing. It's just a real simple description, and it'll literally be like, crushed by a boulder, doesn't have 25 cents for a phone call, and they're just, which is a real one. And that episode, he's literally in a phone booth, and he goes, no, I don't have 25 cents, and then turns into the Hulk. And it's it might be the most amusing list I've ever read. I'll send it to you, because it's very fun. Well, that is the week. Thank you for doing this. I'll have to follow up with you on both the Hulk Out list and Chomps, but we did it. We quarantine recorded.
All right. Yeah, this is fantastic. I very much enjoyed this. So thank you so much.
That's Kelli Dunham. Very funny, very smart, again, ridiculously accomplished, and I thank her for doing the show with me and for all that she's doing currently in the world of creative arts and in the medical industry. So Pete is yelling, we probably have raiders at my house, or maybe it's someone dropping off batteries or something like that, I don't know. But if you want to email me, do so, tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com, canada@kenreedy.com. You can go on the Patreon, which is just patreon.com/tvguidancecounselor. We're on @tvguidance on all the things. I'm putting more episodes up on YouTube, more content coming, and I promise you I'll be here next week for a brand new edition of TV Guidance Counselor. Hope you're well.
Because you've got a kid doesn't mean you're not touching any kid.